J.J. Thomson, this guy, discovered the electron. He did this using cathode rays, which are a newly discovered property of electricity, and that if you evacuated all of the air out of a vacuum tube, you could have, instead of a spark, you'd have a glowing, eerie ray, similar to a neon light. And so what J.J. Thomson did was some experiments on these rays, and he discovered that if you used a magnetic field, you could deflect these rays. And not only that, they were always negatively charged, and that the negative charge is attached to the ray in the form of particles. And that if you use the properties of electricity and magnetism, you would have to determine that the particles were smaller than any atom known at that point, even hydrogen. And that's a real problem, because at that point, the only model they had was the billiard ball model, which didn't allow for atoms to have a positive and negative part, and in fact made them completely indivisible. You couldn't have a particle smaller than the hydrogen nucleus at all. So J.J. Thomson had to come up with a new model for the atom. He came up with the plum pudding model. You may have heard it called the raisin bun model or the chocolate chip cookie model, but those aren't what he intended. Those suggest static electrons embedded in a positive core, when in fact the electrons have to be free to move around the atom, or else the whole thing is pointless. The reason that he made plum pudding is that those electrons could be free to escape from the nucleus of the atom and create the cathode rays. Chocolate chip cookies don't allow for that, right? So, what J.J. Thomson did changed how people thought about the atom. It made it completely different. It was suddenly a positive and a negative section. But of course, there's a problem with that, because a few years later, Bohr used his gold foil experiment to disprove, and instead proved that atoms are mostly hollow and had negative parts and positive parts, but there was a lot of space in them too, and what we now know as orbitals. And in fact, even more erroneous on J.J. Thomson's part was the fact that electrons are completely particles. His own son, G.P. Thomson, discovered that the electron, in fact, could act like a particle or a wave. He played a critical role